Hi all, let's see what is attribute routing in ASP.NET Core and how it's work. This is the continuation of routing video. In previous video, we saw what is routing and types of routing. There are two types of routing. One is conventional based routing and attribute routing. We saw already conventional based routing. In conventional based routing, we used to map the endpoint in use endpoint middleware. Here, inside this use endpoints middleware, I didn't configure any default endpoint. Let's configure using attribute routing. Before that, let's see what is attribute routing. The attribute routing uses the attributes defined directly on the controller action to define the routes. That is, we use the route attribute to define our routes. We could apply the route attribute on the controller or on the controller action methods like this. Let's see. In home controller, I want default endpoint as index view of the home controller. That is, when application started, it will redirect to index view of the home controller. Let's configure the route. Here, inside the route, I mentioned the controller name only. Let's check by running. Here, after hosted server URL path, type controller name and press enter. It will redirect to index action method. If you type action method name after the controller and press enter, it will redirect to 404 error page because we have to specify the full path of the route. For that, let's check by running. And the controller name and the action method and press enter, it will redirect it successfully. If you type only controller name and press enter, it will redirect it successfully. Both are working now, but I want the default endpoint as index view of the home controller when application started. For that, this syntax makes this method as default endpoint. Let's check by running. Here, when application started, it will redirect to index view of the home controller successfully. Here, you can pass multiple route attribute on a single action method, and this syntax makes this method as a default endpoint of the application. That is, when you run the application, it will redirect it to index view of the home controller. Let's see the example of passing parameter inside route attribute. In this student detail action method, I'm passing the parameter and getting the student detail of who having that ID. Let's configure the route. Controller name, action name, and passing the parameter inside the braces. Here, I mentioned the parameter as mandatory. Let's check by running. Controller name, action name, and the parameter, and press enter. Here, the student detail redirected successfully with the ID who having two. If you're not passing the parameter and press enter, it will redirect to 404 error because we mentioned ID as mandatory. If you want to specify this ID as optional, just add question mark in end of the parameter and make this ID as optional. If the ID is not passing, then default value is 3. Let's check by running. After hosted server URL, controller name, then action method, and don't pass the parameter, press enter. Given detail view redirected successfully without passing the parameter because we mentioned it as optional. Here, we specified the controller name in every route configuration of action method. Instead of specifying in all configurations, let's make this common. Add route attribute and specify the controller name and remove the controller name in all route configuration. Let's check by running. Here, the application route URL is not redirected to our index view of the home controller, but if you type the controller name after the hosted server URL and press enter, it will redirect. Also, if you specify the action method name and press enter, it will also redirect it because this route template is combined with all the route configuration of the action method so that it's not redirected to our application route URL. For that, the route template on the index method, specify the forward slash inside that or tilde operator before that. This template makes do not combine with the root template applied to the controller. Let's check by running. Index view of the home controller redirected successfully when application started. Next, token replacement. The attribute routing makes it easier for us by providing the tokens, controller, and action. These tokens gets replaced by their actual values in the route collection. Like this, let's specify the token and check. Instead of specifying the controller name, add the square bracket and specify the controller inside that. Like this, add the action. In future, if you want to change the controller name, no need to configure that inside the route attribute. Let's check by running. If we specify the controller name and press enter, redirected successfully, and also action method. You can also specify this action token inside this. They no need to specify the action in every configuration of action method. So this is an controller name and action method. Let's check. Redirected. If you specify the controller name and action method, it will redirect it successfully. But if you specify the controller name and press enter, it will redirect it to 404 error page because we specified here the controller and action method. For that, you should add the controller name, the default action method of the controller. Specify the controller name. Before that, add a tilde operator. Then let's check by running. Then add the controller name after the hosted server URL and press enter. It will redirect it successfully. Mixed routing is you can specify both convention based routing and attribute routing in the same project, but if you define the attribute routing on an action, then convention based routing cannot be used on that action. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.